The story begins with the system telling someone that they are no fun to be around, and therefore demands that he fell in love at first sight a year ago, and now they are about to get married. And even though his fiancée is so beautiful and adorable, she, of a woman, moves away from Ayun to approach the boy and touch the sword he holds. But as she does, he feels a hot current coursing through his entire body, which then erupts and surges forward. Faced with such a burst of power, Ayun's fiancée quickly rushes towards the source of said power, and as she approaches, she proclaims how an immortal dares to be so presumptuous in front of her home, and furthermore, if he dares to disturb her husband, she will kill him. But upon arriving and seeing that her husband has several men kneeling before him, and that everything is under control, she subtly feigns a fall, intentionally falling into Ayun's arms. In response, Ayun, while holding his fiancée, he asks what's wrong, and the girl affectionately replies that she accidentally tripped because she was in such a hurry to find him. After witnessing this scene, which is more fake than your girlfriend, Yun, along with everyone else, expresses his gratitude for helping him move forward, remarking, "So the younger generation definitely doesn't intend to bother you at all." The two of them. And, sweating profusely, he continues, saying that the two of them are truly a match made in heaven, and their marriage. She's not like those competitive immortals out there. Furthermore, she's an ordinary, weak woman who, despite her family was ordained by heaven. This happened as he was thinking that it was all over, since the old man had the opportunity to help him advance. But now that Chiron is there, he doesn't know what will happen, because if he calls him a bootlicker, he'll suffer a horrible death. Chiron, seeing this guy, gets a little upset since he knows exactly who he is, but seeing that look, Kaldi speaks up. That boy shouldn't have said anything he wasn't supposed to, but he wonders with some doubt how he progressed so far. With such a mediocre attitude, especially since he can see that he's only in the first stage of refinement and in the first stage of the transformation, and looking at Ayun, he wonders if it's possible that he actually helped him, which the girl ends up signing when Ayun asks how much progress she's made, since she hadn't done anything at that point, with Chiron pausing thinking, he says, he understands now, deducing that because Ayun is such a great expert, if he were to help them, it would cause a huge scandal. He understands that Ayun had to restrain himself, so as not to frighten her as a mortal would be, but completely changing her attitude. She says that her husband must have hidden his identity, but he allowed that dog to take advantage of the situation, which, Rich, isn't arrogant, and knows how to be a good girl. All this while showing us how they affectionately is unforgivable, and she trembles with anger. However, Ayun, seeing the girl trembling, wonders what the reason is, and, looking at her from this angle, he wonders if Chiron might actually be a delicate and ordinary woman, and therefore, he's too afraid to meet a cultivator or anything like that, and based on his thoughts, he asks June to get up, explaining that his wife is shy and scared, words that completely stunned him. Boy, who is confused about who is supposed to be shy. Ayun, smiling, tells him that she is his fiancée and that he shouldn't be afraid because they are all good people and won't cause any trouble for mortals, then asks if he's right about that. However, upon hearing Ayun address his fiancée as mortal, Jianjun asks how the sect master can be considered a mere mortal in Ayun's eyes. He says, frightened, that if that's the case, then in Ayun's eyes they are mere ants, phrasing it that way. But looking at them like that, Ayun wonders why they suddenly withered, wondering if perhaps they are hungry. Thinking this way, he asks his fiancée why they don't let them in affection to each other. Ayun, seeing his fiancée in her wedding dress, asks why she's wearing it for dinner, since things are not easy for them. The girl accepts without any issues, but she is amazed by his words. It is said that her husband is such a hypocrite that he invites people he dislikes to dinner just to maintain his public image. Gentle and kind, she smiled outwardly, but was annoyed inside, saying it's all because of those dogs who are looking for opportunities, and with a cold expression, she says that they will never be saved, or rather, that she will not forgive them. A moment later, everyone was comfortably settled inside Ayun's house, with a banquet laid out before them. And at this sight, Jianjun thanks Ayun for being so kind to them, as they had never eaten such a delicious meal before, which is overly polite, considering it's just a routine. Ayun argues this, but while it might seem like a routine to Ayun, for January, Ayun, while bringing a piece of meat to his mouth, says that it might look like a home-cooked meal, but a man of his caliber could give him anything with a hidden secret, and perhaps that's a spiritual food that could help him improve his cultivation. However, nothing is as it seems, because the moment he tastes it, he ends up soon, to which the girl responds that she wants to wear it more often to show it to her husband, since after foaming at the mouth as if it were poison, and in intense pain, he says that this isn't what it was to be expected since he can't even move, and he wonders if that's what moving forward feels like, but he immediately dismisses the thought. He says that something isn't right. Oh-jun, seeing everyone collapsed on the table, asks what's wrong, and his fiancée responds with a question. How did they get drunk so quickly? It's a shame, she adds, since the dishes she prepared are not finished yet. All this while confessing that what she gave those people was poison prepared by herself, simply for interrupting her wedding, and therefore, if they don't die from the poison, she will kill them all herself. Yoon is well aware that what he was given was poison, a poison that seemingly has no effect on him, as he eats the food without any issues, which surprises Jun, because not only is Yoon unharmed after consuming the poison, but his aura has also increased drastically, leading him to wonder what kind of terrifying power that is. While Yoon complimented his fiancée, telling her that the dishes she had put so much effort into should not be it might get ruined after the wedding. Ayun asks what she means by only the wedding dress getting ruined, wasted, which causes the mutual affection between the two to grow stronger. But what also increases is, Ayun was drinking because he was a little drunk, and because of this, his fiancée suggests that he go to sleep, since all the guests are asleep, and because it's better than staying there, Ayun agrees, as it's time to take a nap, a suggestion that is affirmed by his fiancée, who tells him that, since he is drunk, she will take him to his room. But before they leave, her maid asks what's going to happen with those people, to which, with a cold look, the girl replies that she has to send them where they need to go. Seconds later, Chiron ends up carrying. Oh-jun went to the room as promised, but not to his room, but to hers, which made her very happy, because finally, she has taken her husband to her room, and, removing this garment, says that in a few days she will be in bed with him, and, as if it will happen anyway, it's not too much to ask for a little practice. But far from being asleep, Ayun was awake. Upon seeing what her fiancé was trying to do, he ended up pinching her inappropriately, and of course, the girl, feeling this, asking her if she doesn't have faith in him, to which the girl, blushing, responds that it's only because she has been working hard on. She blushes and says she can't believe her husband pinched her there. She tells Oh-jun and warns him. King-roon thinks that if she isn't good, then of course he won't be good either, and he'll bite her, teasing her a little. He asks how she managed to catch a thief while sleeping, then asks what the thief was trying to steal. But I don't think he even needs to ask because it's not even worth asking since we all know what he wanted to steal from her. And leaning against his chest, excited, she tells herself that she will be with her husband for the rest of her life, and anyone who tries to stop her won't live to tell the tale. Next, we move on to the divine door, where Yoon had recounted almost everything that happened to him, and upon hearing this, she was proclaiming that Chiron is the head of the divine sect, but unworthy of the position, because she administered that disgusting poison to her fellow disciples for the sake of falling in love with a mortal, thereby arguing that the Holy Father decided to exercise his divine right, dismissing her as head of the sect, and all of this was declared by the Holy Father of the divine sect, who was this person in the form of a child, and this person, summoning 2 of his men, informed them that they had his poses to make him happy, and we already know which poses he's referring to. Excited to hear this, Oh-jun says, to go with him to arrest the criminal Chiron and bring her to justice. The scene then shifting to Ayu as she was leaving the room, looking a little exhausted, he tells us that what he did was so dangerous that he almost lost his soul. Remembering what happened, he says that Chiron is a good girl and he really shouldn't have taken advantage of her beforehand, getting married, thus implying that they had relations. Another person who remembers what happened very well is Chiron, who said that Oh-jun is so strong that just conversing with him, the spiritual power he granted her is enough to make her desperately try to digest it, and since she couldn't endure it for long on the wedding day, she resolves that she must endure it even longer. However, as Kweon pondered the details, she was interrupted by her maid, who seemed somewhat concerned. He tells her that something is wrong, and pointing towards those 2 distinct energies, informs her that members of the divine sect have arrived. This surprises the girl slightly, as she hadn't anticipated their arrival so soon, and knowing she can't allow her husband to see her, she asks her maid to watch over her husband, as she doesn't want him to realize she's missing, and well, that this girl simply fulfills all his fantasies about a wife, and he doesn't care if she can't achieve a supreme level. Energies that the maid had identified belonged to the Holy Father of the divine sect, along with one of his subordinates, which they narrowly avoid as it was aimed directly at them. Upon recognizing that energy, the Holy Father, he tells Chiron that if he dares to disrespect him, this Holy Father says he can resign from his sect master position today. Sect master position. All the while, he's thinking to himself that if he kills everyone in the divine sect, will be under his command. Although, of course, the girl won't allow it. She tells the Holy Father that she knew it was him, and that he's so old and meddlesome that she's not surprised he isn't tall enough, and has a great energy, surrounded him, telling the Holy Father that since he only desires the teacher's position, he can have it, but he had to get lost and stop barking and disturbing her husband's sleep. However, all of this is a sign of respect towards the Holy Father, especially since the girl is looking at him with contempt. To punish her, he ends up pulling something from his chest, which turns out to be a parchment. Upon contact with the surrounding environment, various inscriptions begin to, of immeasurable longevity cultivation. Since, as long as he grows old with her and his house is full, form. And it's clear that with this, the Holy Father expects to see Chiron crying and begging for mercy. The slightly surprised girl recognizes the writing and asks if it belongs to the sect master. The Holy Father confirms this, explaining that as the ruler of the divine sect, he is free to use the power of the writing. Trapping her with his energy, he informs her that all the divine punishments, condensed by divine power, are contained within of the past sect masters, and it is so dangerous that if she summons mortals and violates the sect rules, the divine punishments are enough to turn her into ashes. Moreover, with a smile, he comments, as for her mortal husband, she had already sent someone to take care of him, and while she focused all her energy, he sent his man and told him that he would have to wait for him he would have to wait until they met in hell, moving on with. This girl, whose name is Sanj, held a needle in her hand, letting us know that she was sent by the partner's old man, but she complained since he always asked her to do housework, so she would take care of this quickly, erase each other, thus saying goodbye to the person, but holding on to his system. This guy begs it not to. Of children and grandchildren. That will be enough to make him happy. This happens while he almost kisses her, and I say almost because this girl, thus, she threw the needle she had in her hand at the girl's maid, who screamed upon impact, and whose scream, he ends up listening to Ayun, who comes over to ask what's wrong, and seeing her looking like that, he becomes a little worried, since he's getting married in a few days and she, who protects him, is now sick. However, without realizing what was happening, as he approached and hugged the girl, the poison from the venomous needle instantly dissipated. But the one who was aware of what was happening was the maid, who was trying to warn him about the danger that had behind him, and that's exactly right, because the girl who injured the maid, realizing that she isn't dead, he plans to take both of their lives together. However, the maid told him to look behind him and pointed in that direction for Ayun. He ends up doing so and notices the girl. However, while it was just a simple glance for Sony, it's not, because from the girl's perspective, Ayun is seen with a menacing aura, staring intently at her, and faced with such a monstrous aura, the girl wonders if it's even possible for a mortal to possess such a terrible aura, and she breaks off the kiss because, in her opinion, it's bad luck for a husband and wife to meet before the wedding, and this is, as she was being harmed by Ayun's aura, she realized that she couldn't resist it at all. With that being the case, fiercely slammed to the ground by Ayun's power, it should be emphasized that the girl suffered significant damage from this, both internal and external damage. Ayun, annoyed that the girl appeared out of nowhere, approaches her and asks where she came from, but when she doesn't answer, Ayun intends to do something, but ultimately refrains and leaves. He says he will let Chiron take care of them. This happens while the maid supports him, telling her master to wait, as he cannot leave now. Sun Yo, terrified by the immense power she has just witnessed, says that she can't believe it, that this guy is Chiron's husband, and worrying even more, he comments that he fears Chiron has been murdered by him. Holy Father, and if Ayun finds out, she will die too. But since she doesn't want that to happen, the girl tries to leave without. However, because of the great damage that the girl received from Ayun, it is difficult for her to move, since her entire body hurts. Her entire body, when she does. And even more so in the place that was burned by that person's breath a while ago. A rule that has been around since the beginning of time, so they can't break the rules, saying that if they moment. However, Ayun notices the girl's condition, and that's why she approaches her to cover her with her coat and tell the maid to forget it, because she's just a girl, and he doesn't want to make her look bad. So the girl, Upon hearing this, she blushes, but excitedly realizes that what's still covering her is a healing spell, and that the man, he gave it to her through his coat, which feels refreshing, like being reborn, and the maid realizes this. The maid, a little annoyed, curses because Ayun is too soft to let that woman get away with it, and, while he watches with a theatrical air, he calls his mistress, claiming there's a girl seducing the master. However, while they were playfully bantering, King, still smiling, told the Holy Father that he didn't want to kill them all, but they are really annoying, and annoyed with what she is about to do. She argues that she didn't want to use her husband's power. This happened while two hands made of energy blocked the attack from the Holy Father's man, which impressed him. But in response to this, the Holy Father asked what he was talking about, which King, freeing himself, demonstrated and said, "Meet before the wedding, something terrible will happen." However, even though she says this to cast doubt, this interruption, that she only has to ask her husband for more kisses in the future. And with that, she ends up expelling the aura that was guarding Ayun, who is truly terrifying. Faced with this, the two of them looked insignificant, and from this, the Holy Father realizes this, and impressed, says that it is impossible, since she is only in the kingdom of the gods of transformation. How could she have such a high level of cultivation? He asks if perhaps she practices some forbidden technique, but then, saying that's enough, he informs the girl that, now, the spirits of all, the sea's masters have become angry with her, and this can only be known by showing the spirits, which at first glance, his anger was noticeable, and as we were being introduced to many of them, the Holy Father says that this is the amazing power, divine, that they left behind after their ascension, and they are so furious that neither he nor she is capable of withstanding it. However, the girl isn't afraid, and, with a cold gaze, asks if they are really that arrogant. She says it's no wonder they are all blind, and unleashing a great amount of energy at them, she comments that if that's the case, then they need to open their action by Gao, annoys the couple, who are staring intently at her. Based on this, the girl tells us that she is a maid with no sense, eyes and clearly see that her husband is not a mere mortal, since Ayun is the most invincible and overwhelming existence of the entire universe. And with those words and his monstrous energy, he ends up completely destroying the sea spirits. The Holy Father ends up disappearing entirely. The Holy Father's subordinate, witnessing this, simply cannot believe it, since the divine sect's strongest soul was so easily destroyed by Chiron. And witnessing this, he comments that the man who gave him his power is a god, a demon, or perhaps even an alien who is already far above all others. And taking out a strange artifact, he continues, saying that they are a great threat to the entire immortal world, and that they must warn everyone to take precautions. After this, a worried Chiron, on her way back, shouted, asking if he is all right and if he has seen any strange people. All the while, she was thinking about how the Holy Father said he sent someone, and she is sure of it. However, before she could finish her sentence, Chiron sees June grabbing Sonyu and hugged her, which gives her this expression. Ayun, noticing his fiancée, asks her why she came outside, however, of humor, and she ends up taking Chiron away, since it's not appropriate for them to be like that, simply apologizing to Ayun in this way. Sun Yue, shouting King Ron's name, is surprised and wonders if she isn't dead. Aojun, upon hearing, Song Yan mentions his fiancée's name and asks if they know each other, leaving her at a loss for words. But to prevent Chiron from making things worse, he grabs her arm and pretends to know her, calling her cousin. He says that there was a reason she was here, explaining that he didn't see her when he went to pick her up outside, all while holding her tightly, almost hurting her. On the verge of hurting her, but not caring, Chiron approaches the girl to warn her that if she doesn't want to be exposed and die without a trace, she has to cooperate. Aojun, astonished by this, asks again if she is his cousin, which his fiancée confirms, telling him that her cousin came from afar and didn't want to frighten him, and after saying something else to him, invented, Aojun ends up believing it, and tells him that the road here hasn't been easy, but as Aojun was saying this, caressing Sonj Kinner, he can't help but get angry with the girl, giving her a push that nearly knocks her soul out of her body, and then he tells his promise to take his cousin to the room so she can freshen up, since she must be tired from her travels, and as she, for doing this. But as Aoyun watched the maid take his fiancée away, he tells her that it's all right. Since they leave, he still smiles, thinking that the girls are so affectionate with each other that they always bicker when they meet, and before this, he should go to bed too. However, when he thought about doing so because of the girl's artifact, when she was communicating with someone, they ended up calling her, and that someone was her partner, who kept asking her to answer. And of course, Ayun. He ends up noticing it, and when he picks up the artifact, he recognizes it and is a little surprised. Moments later, Sayu, while was observing the artifact, he heard someone asking Sonyu to come back quickly, because that man, definitely, isn't mortal, and since the saint is dead, it's not something they can deal with. Ayun, a little confused, recognizes the name of the person they were calling, leading them to wonder who it could be. What saint, what immortal he is. Could it be that Sun and she are immortal activators? Sonju's partner sent a photo through the artifact, and upon seeing this photo, Ajun thinks he recognizes the person, but because it appears somewhat blurry, he can't quite distinguish them. Furthermore, in order for the photo to be completely clear, it is necessary to inject aura for verification. But he will see his wife in bed. All the while, he thinks that it's a pity his kind wife is so weak and incapable of. However, Aoyu doesn't believe he possesses aura, and therefore, with a sigh, he says he should forget about it, since he first has to clarify the fact that Son Yue is an immortal cultivator. But what Aju fails to perceive is that at the moment of when he sighed, air ended up entering the artifact. Meanwhile, Sun Pu's partner was in another location, showing everyone. The immortals presented evidence that King Ron conspired with external forces and assassinated the Holy Father. In light of this, one of the people in the audience stated that he had been in the world of immortal cultivation for 400 years, and had never witnessed such majestic arrogance, wondering if he might be a demon. But another person among them, the partner, says that it's impossible because King Rong's aura is pure, and if it were a demonic aura, she would already be dead. However, just as he says this, Sony's partner reports an intrusion of unknown energy. This attack impacts some people, and in response, one of them says that, as he mentioned before, they shouldn't have offended King Rong, since she and her supporter want to kill the sect, but as I expected, this, taking care of herself. However, I don't think the part about her not being able to take care of herself is entirely true, because when alone with perhaps it's the sigh that the artifact absorbed from Ao Yun, which manifested and was released through the artifact. The old man, faced with such power, wonders what kind of power destroys ancient monuments on such a massive scale. And although the wings were destroyed, no one was injured, which leads one to wonder if the owner of that power perhaps doesn't want to. The Grand Elder of the Divine Sect, who was present, shouts that this is a warning, saying that he fears His Holiness's act of arresting Chiron has angered the Master, and with this, he is simply saying that he can take over the Divine Sect whenever he wants, even if the entire world is against it. Immortal cultivation will be in your pocket. Sony's colleague, frightened, says that this power was passed down through the Jade Tablet, which can only mean that Son Yue has fallen into their clutches. With that being said, let's move on to Son Yue, who was being abused by King Ron simply because, according to him, Son Yue was feigning innocence in order to win her husband's favor, and well, obviously the girl was pretending, because he had told her to play dumb. Her maid, she ends up scolding her for interrupting. Faced with this, the maid has no choice but to apologize, but that she was stupid. So she asked him why he was blaming her now, which is justifiable, but King Ron still. She tells her to put on her clothes and leave because her husband hates immortals more than anything, and therefore, if she doesn't want to avoid dying, he had to conceal his identity and return to the Divine Sect the next day. At this, Sonj gets up and says that she is the head of the Divine Sect, and asks if she won't return and give them an explanation, which she promises to do since she will write a letter declaring her intention to step down, and then they can choose a successor when the time comes. This was while she was thinking that if it weren't for her pure spiritual body being able to seal that man, the Divine Sect would not. He would have insisted on becoming his master, claiming they had promised to do whatever he wanted, but they interrupted their marriage. However, Ao Yun enters the room and approaches his fiancée. He asks if she is okay, and she confirms that she is, but tells him not to do that because her cousin is watching. Ao Yun, standing in front of his fiancée, tells her that her cousin is not the same anymore, because he discovered that she leave him, since he can't live without it. This boy, whose name is Ayun, is a wasteland traveler, and lacking any talent tells the young lady that she did so because she said that girls can't be too proactive, or they will make the men, is a cultivator and belongs to a sect, and seeing that Sonj doesn't want to admit it, he takes out the J tablet. He claims to have proof, and proceeds to show many adult videos that he had saved on his tablet. This causes the girl to ask him to close it, but instead of closing it, Ayun starts to mention all the titles of the videos he had stored, and upon hearing this, Chiron pretends to be shocked and tells his cousin that he didn't expect her to be like that. While comforting his fiancée, Ayun suspects that Sonj wanted to catch King Ron in the act, and he tells this to the girl, who, after witnessing this whole scene from King Ron, it's quite annoying since King Ron fought for the freedom to watch movies on her own, but now she's pretending to be a saint, and since what goes around comes around, she pretended to be one too, therefore playing the victim. She admits that she did something wrong, but claims she was also forced, telling Ayun that she didn't want to cultivate immortality. But the master of the divine gate captured her and forced her to study all day so that he wouldn't. They feel despised, words that make the girl stop hitting him, and in response, she tells him that it was only hit her if she didn't. Hearing this, Ayun asks if that's true, but his fiancé, who knew he was pretending, she tries to say something, but the girl doesn't let her, continuing to tell Ayun that if he wants to blame someone, he had to blame the master of the divine sect. All the while, he was thinking that if he pulled a trick like King Ron, he should face it. Ayun naively believes this whole story and wonders how a sect master like that could even exist. Of course, King Ron was very displeased by this. Sonj continues with his deception, commenting that the sect master was so weird that he could have killed them, so he ran away because he couldn't take it anymore. All the while, he was thinking that there was no realize that what her husband hates is her, meaning she says this because Chiron is an immortal. Even though her husband, not knowing this and upset by Sonju's words, Chiron has no choice but to frown, while still. He wondered if he wouldn't be miserable if he found her that way, which Chiron, while pushing his cousin, affirms, since if he gets caught, he will definitely hit her, and therefore asks Sonju why he doesn't. Her pedantic idea, before meeting her husband, and settling down while gazing at him adoringly, she says that Ayun is different because he is a take the initiative and go return her. However, before the girl can take her out, Ayun comments that she has decided to take her in, Sonji, and help her hide from the divine headquarters, and naturally, these words take the girls by surprise. Nevertheless, as Chiron approached his fiancée, Sonji worriedly told herself that if she stayed there, she would be a traitor to. Sixth, this is true in certain respects, but how would one know this, considering the girls are? Addressing her relatives, he tells his fiancée that he doesn't want her to be sad if something happens to his cousin, which makes her very happy, since her husband is doing that for her, and indeed, he is doing it for her, which is why he tells her not to worry. Even if they are mortal, he will find a way. And he says this because he is sure that the life-saving items that were exchanged with the system in the past should be useful now. Suni doesn't like Aoyu's words about them being mortal at all, since clearly those two are experts from the very beginning, but they pretend to be mortals, and besides, Chiron, being so strong, always acts weak in front of him. However, what wonderful man. However, with a change in attitude, she mentions that she doesn't know how many women will want to get into his. Is true is that, as King Tron said, Ayu has no interest in cultivating immortals and only wants to live. In seclusion, Ao Jun interrupts the girl's thoughts to hand her Had's chart, telling her that even though it may have become a habit, it's best to delete the contents as soon as possible, as excessive practice is not good for your health. Furthermore, he informs her that someone contacted her through the Jade a moment ago to tell her something along the lines of the saint's death, and since that person is surely someone she knows, he asks not to be sad, but instead of being sad, the girl was stunned by this news. However, even though it may not seem like it, the girl was also a little touched, because even though Ayun doesn't know who that saint is, he comforted her so much, with such sweetness, and patiently healed her wounds. Blushing slightly, she says that this man is completely different from the people of the divine sect, who only forced her to practice, which leads me to believe that, apparently, the story that the girl told Ayun wasn't entirely made up, since they really did force her to cultivate. Ayun, seeing her like bed, but he has chosen her and she shouldn't worry, since he truly loves her and has demonstrated that to her over time. This wanted to leave her alone for a while, so he takes his fiancée by the hand, and they withdraw. And as they were leaving, he kept saying that maybe Song Yi was a being from another world, and that Chiron II was to blame for the Holy Father's death. Then we moved on to the secret realm of the divine sect, where Song Yi summoned her companion using the jade tablet. His partner answers her call, and when Song Yi's name is mentioned, everyone there is quite surprised, since they believed she was dead. To clear up his doubts, her partner, named Lu Yu, asks Song Yi whether Chiron truly has strong backing, which the girl confirms, but she tries to tell him something more without. However, Lu Yu cuts her off, saying it's great because Chiron has really gained even more muscle. Dense, saying that she was never meant to be the rightful head of the sect to begin with, and now she wants to dominate the immortal world. Faced with this, Lu Yu tells her companion to wait, as she will find someone stronger to save her, but I think the girl doesn't want to be saved, and she's trying to make her partner understand that. But even though the girl is supposedly secure in his love, she tells her maid that she doesn't want her to invite women to the masquerade. Before she can tell him, the transmission cuts out, leaving him confused. Faced with this, he asks the man who. He discovers what's happening. The man in front of him is the great elder of the sect, who explains that it's because they've reached the secret prison, and there's pure aura everywhere. If the soul isn't a pure magical soul, then it can't be used here. Jumping ahead, it's mentioned that he thought she had been tortured and suppressed over the years by the purest aura in the place, and that she had given up on escaping, unaware that she was still being tortured. All this is shown while we see a door filled with pure aura, along with several chains securing it. The old man, along with the other sect members, stood before her as the old man shouted, demanding that the divine key be broken. Lu Yu, while observing this grand door, remarked to the great elder that he had heard that the witch imprisoned there was sealed by King Ron, and upon hearing this, he inquired if it was possible that she was more powerful than King Ron. The Grand Elder told him that when King Ron succeeded as the sect leader in suppressing public opinion, the wedding banquet, much less immortals. Upon hearing this, her maid protests, arguing that it's fine for her to pretend to be a former sect leader claimed that it was King Ron who sealed her. However, it was this realm that truly sealed the witch, a secret brimming with pure aura. Though he doesn't reveal this last part to the boy, he explains to everyone that demons are arrogant, but they were born to be defeated by the purest spiritual energy, while people who cultivate immortality have been doing so for a long time. But unfortunately, that practice is deceptive and easily adheres to objects, but it is difficult for the human body to refine, and only a natural spiritual body, natural like King Ron's, can truly utilize pure spiritual energy, saying, "So, old master." He adopted the orphan Kinron and taught her spiritual arts, believing that she could one day be of use. The righteous path to eliminate evil. However, a new and more powerful witch later seized the throne, and magic. Kinron's spiritual power had been perfected. Therefore, the old master knew he could no longer delay, and so, therefore, in order for her to take on the responsibility of fighting against the demon clan, Zeta's former master, mortal and playhouse with the master, but she cannot trifle with her marriage, since she is the master of, he passed on the position of Zeta's master to her, and as a result, to repay the kindness of his upbringing, Kinron fought the witch, Death, but they were unable to defeat each other. After becoming exhausted, he finally brought the witch to the secret realm, and thanks to this, the purity of the natural aura of that place has sealed the witch until this very day, today. However, the old man says that King Ron was seriously injured that time and was expected to die, but unexpectedly, he came back to life, and since then, his personality has become arrogant and ruthless. Luo Yu, along with all of his companions, is shocked to hear all of this, as he thought it was just a simple adoption favor. But it was not. He realized it was a case of exploitation, so he believes anyone would be upset, and understandably so. One of his companions confirms this, saying that, on second thought, Chiron is a little pathetic, but the one he doesn't feel sorry for is the Great Elder, who says that it's still no big deal to sacrifice her for the sake of the sect's prosperity, but now, who has found greater support, it is very likely that he now harbors resentment towards the Divine Sect. The Divine Sect, one of the four great gods of the transformation realm, and because of that title, her. With that said, the Great Elder informs everyone that they have arrived at the location of the witch's true body, powerful. However, the presence of these people makes the witch a little angry, and she tries to drive the visitors away with her roar, to scare away the visitors. But she is stopped by the Great Elder, who tells her not to dare, since they are there, to make a deal, and while showing her a seal, he says that it depends on her whether she wants her freedom or not, which greatly interests the witch, who, still a bit angry, asks the elder to speak, and this is because, which greatly interests the witch, who, although a little angry, asks the old man to speak, and this is because he recognized the spell that the Great Elder was using. While demonstrating the spell, he explains that this is how it works, since that is a spell developed by successive masters to temporarily release her from the currents of her aura, and If she cooperates with them in fighting the enemy, he can release her from her imprisonment. Faced with this, the witch expresses her doubts, mentioning to the elder that he was mocked by just one girl. Marriage is not just a family matter, but also a matter concerning the divine sect's status among the, and tarnish her reputation to this day, asking if there is anyone who can withstand her cunning. Transforming into her human form, she expresses her curiosity about what kind of person could be even more difficult to deal with than herself. Even as the fearsome demon king Wen Kiru, she still sneezed, and this was because a box that had been left for so long. Time unclaimed, his reward was already located in Polbata, and because so much time has passed and he still hasn't. He doesn't know if those canine system items can be used to defend against deities, but, taking everything into account, he says that in order to clear up his doubts, he'll have Miss Sonju take a look, since, after all, she is an immortal cultivator. Seconds later, Ayun shows the artifacts to the girls, and upon seeing them, both are impressed and ask her that if she wants to use them to fight against the divine sect, which Ayun confirms, but judging by the girl's reaction, he thinks they aren't good enough and asks if they are really that bad. However, it's quite the opposite, since the girls, upon seeing this, are left speechless because the sect's power is far worse than that of those artifacts. Cultivating immortality was abandoned by his system. However, let's not be fooled, because when the system, immortals. Furthermore, those men who are in love with her have found out that she is getting married and have been saying, but, thinking they are still useless, Ayun asks again if they are of no use, to which Suni replies that, of course, since the elder's belongings are far too precious, and he's never encountered such a profound soul in response to them before. Yun. He claims it's nothing, just some small objects he happened to pick up, but upon hearing this, the girl, it's said that such a magnificent magical soul is nothing more than a small object to him. Oyun, without further ado, comments that, in that case, Miss Sonj should control those magical weapons so that she can deal with the divine sect. This causes the girls to react in this manner, but Oyun then mentions to her that she is immortal, so he knows more than someone who is supposed to be immortal like him. However, Sunwoo, referring to himself as mortal, isn't really sitting well with her, since he possesses such a powerful artifact and still calls himself a mere mortal, and on top of that, he asks her to deal with the divine sect. Or is he simply testing her talents with all of this? Because it's written in the illustrated book that when a master with the greatest power intends to retire, they will choose a gifted disciple to whom they will. Serious matters and rumors are circulating that she has entrusted herself to another person, wondering how one could resist slapping her in the face, transmit their power, and she excitedly wonders if it's possible that she has been chosen by the master to be his, Harris. All the while, Kimron watched her and called her a fool, because Ayun was doing all of this to prevent her from being scared when he had to reveal his identity to her. And that's why Uyun asked Sun Yue to fight against the divine sect. However, considering Sun Yu's cultivation level, it's simply impossible for him to control those primordial spirits. Ayun, seeing her so pensive, wonders if she might be jealous, and so he picks her up to stop her from thinking such things, insignificant things. And by doing this, the girl, now even more confident, tells herself that it doesn't matter, since her fiancé must have a plan, saying that those people from the divine sect are nothing to fear anyway. Moving on to the most well-known demon king, like the witch, we are shown how she received energy from the elder, who mentioned that he had placed a talisman to the spell on his body, and now she can move freely for the time being, but she must remember that it is only temporary, since only by accepting the Buddhism of the 7 talismans can she be completely free, and then, in the face, thus letting us know that the girl is not as weak or fragile as her husband believes, because, as we've seen, the girl, it's time to fulfill her promise. However, this promise seems very distant, as the witch ends up breaking her word and offers the great elder a powerful energy blast, causing him to fall, badly injured, alongside the others. The witch, with great malice in her eyes, she tells the great elder that if he thinks that after regaining his freedom, he will keep negotiating terms with her, threatening him by saying he must hand over the remaining 6 talons, or else she will not be responsible for what might happen. The great elder, unafraid of her words, calls her a despicable witch and dares her to kill him if she can, because if she does, she will lose the Ufu's divine fall technique. If he obtains the mantra relief amulet, he still won't be able to undo the shackles on his body. However, the witch knows something. He knows this better than anyone, and therefore, using his power on his disciple, he tells him that he will not kill him, but warns him that if he does not listen to him, his disciples will suffer the consequences, and if he doesn't promise to undo the spell, he will kill every single one of them. But, while he was saying this, Had's board ended up falling from Lu Yu's hand, and as it fell, it reflected the aura of, indeed, she is a very respected and important person, and that is why the maid believes that the young lady should reveal to Ayun's psalm, which, acting on its own, forces the witch to retreat, and all of this is because the artifact still had some of the energy from Ayun's sigh. The witch, impressed by such power, comments that the aura feels familiar, and, remembering something, she realizes it must be him, since only someone like him would possess such an aura. Remembering this, her eyes open wide, and grabbing Luo Yu, she excitedly asks if he knows him or what their relationship is. The old elder is speechless upon hearing that the witch knows him, and therefore concludes that they must be in league with each other. And, if that is the case, the old man declares that the witch cannot be allowed to live any longer. This he says while preparing a spell. However, the witch isn't going to let that old man hurt her, and with her power, she ends up summoning the purple sword, which does a great deal of damage to the old man, who asks how she dares to make an enemy of him, or if she's seeking death. But disregarding his words, the witch orders Lu Yu to go and find the talisman and give it to her, or else she'll take his life. But unwilling to give up, and even though he is suffering from the purple sword, he tells the witch that even if she snatches the talisman from him, he won't undo the spell for her true identity, because with Ayun's level of cultivation, no one in the world would dare to be arrogant. And why does she say, suffering from the purple sword? He tells the witch that even if she takes the talisman from her, he will not undo the spell for her, which the witch doesn't care much about, as she laughs and asks if he thinks that he, the sixth divine gate, is the only one in this world who can cast the spell, and grabbing Bu Yu, she tells and orders him to take her to him. And so, together with the boy, she ends up leaving Sonj cave, where she was training and reciting some words, in order to control the artifacts that Ayun entrusted to her. However, all of this is in vain, since the girl, for 5, no matter how hard she tries, she can't do it, and annoyed by this, Chiron says that she is stupid. But thanks to Ayun coming out too, no matter how hard she tries, she can't do it, and annoyed by this, Chiron says that she is stupid, but thanks to Ayun coming out quickly, he picks himself up. There's still some time left, and so Sonj approaches him and tells him that old Tony is a loser, but at the same time, at least he is skilled in spiritual magic, and if he is spiritually gifted, why would he accept someone with such low grades as his disciple? To which the girl responds by telling him that it is none of his concern. However, even if it is not a matter of her business, grabbing her by the arm, she tells her that if it weren't for her husband, she wouldn't even bother worrying about her. And as she channeled this, well, we will find out soon enough. Moving on to Ayun, he himself, while wearing a smile that wasn't very genuine, her power, she tells him to observe very carefully, since she will only demonstrate it to him once, thus teaching him how it's done. Or rather, told how the artifacts are controlled, and it was so strong that Sonj is impressed by the enormous power of those artifacts. However, the witch, who was arriving, notices this and realizes that it is just a weapon, magic, and it is a pity that the magic weapon is excellent, but the person casting the spell is not skilled enough. Good, thus sending his energy dragon, which effortlessly ends up destroying one of the artifacts, and since Sonj was controlling it, he receives great damage. Seeing this, King Ron asks him to calm his mind. This explosion was noticed by Ayun, who, worried, quickly ran to the site of the explosion, wondering if it was someone from the sixth divine gate. The energy dragon continued wreaking havoc, attempting to destroy the other artifacts, but before it could, Chiron destroyed it. Seeing that it was the witch, he asks Lu Yu if they let her out to deal with her, calling them stupid and ignorant for doing so, but interrupting. He said it's true that a loser is an easy target, and therefore must endure the pressure of being looked down upon, but it is what he's saying. The witch asks Chiron not to pretend in front of her, because if he hadn't deceived her with treacherous, she would be nothing more than a defeated woman. Showing him Had's tablet, he asks what relationship she has with him, to which the girl does not respond. However, upon seeing the artifact, she wonders if it is the breath of her dear husband, words that bother and confuse the witch, who asks her, what husband? How is that possible? That a man as kind as him could be with a cunning woman like her? Annoyed by this, she assumes that she must have used some dirty method to seduce him, and with this in mind, she launches an attack with very fast and King Ron realizes this, and he thinks that the witch has been sealed for all these years, allowing her cultivation to improve. He thinks so highly of her, and based on this, he wonders if she is the first genius of the demonic world. And while receiving damage from the witch, he confesses that in his last fight, he used too much of Laura, which was given to him by her husband, and now he cannot mobilize at all, which leads her to wonder if it is possible for them to withstand the blow. And just when it seems that this is the end, it's so obvious from looking at the person in front of him that he wonders if this girl wants him to devour her or not. A familiar aura ends up protecting her from the attack, which confuses the witch, but then she sees the large figure behind her. King, still impressed, says it's Ayun's breath condensed into a divine form, and annoyed, she doesn't explain that the divine phase is linked to its master's mind, and even if they are thousands of kilometers away, it will help him guard what he wants to. Protect, leading one to wonder if that woman and her family are truly so important in her heart. And with that, the witch is thrown backward by the large figure, and as she retreats, she is impressed by the incredibly powerful aura he possesses, as it's too much to bear even for a god, and for a man as powerful as him. Ayun, why are you hanging out with Chiron? The girl asks. However, even if that's true, she doesn't plan to give up, because she met him first, and if she hadn't been sealed for so long, Ayun would have been her husband. And, preparing her whip, she says that even if she has to use all of her cultivation, she doesn't care, because she has to prove that she is the right one for him, and so she launches her attack again. This happens while it's being said that she is the woman strong enough to stand shoulder. Why does he want to bring it if he doesn't intend to give it? And furthermore, why is he walking so slowly if he does want to give it? This girl is to shoulder with him. However, at the last moment, she stops when she hears a familiar voice calling out to Chiron. The witch, upon seeing Ayun, is overjoyed, her eyes brimming with happiness as they have finally reunited. However, the manner in which Ayun reacts doesn't seem to suggest that he remembers her, and this is confirmed when the witch approaches him, because the boy reacted in a way that the witch didn't anticipate, ultimately pushing her away. And even though it might appear to be a simple push, I don't think it felt that way for the girl, as it triggered a small explosion while Ayun was approaching Chiron and asking if he was all right. Chiron tells him that he is not well and inquires as to why. He suddenly returned, and Ayun responded that he saw from the mountain that this place was making a lot of noise, so he hurried back. However, remembering what happened, the girl gives thanks for God's protection, because thanks to it, she didn't move, and her husband still doesn't know she has cultivation powers. Pretending, she hugs Ayun and tells him that he had to come earlier because she was scared to death. Ayun, saddened, turns his. Ayun's maid brought her something to eat, but she was so bewildered that she didn't dare approach her. Look, and thinks that he really thought the divine sect was simple, but he was wrong, as they are very harsh, aside from mentioning that he had been collecting herbs for Miss Sange's cultivation, but it didn't work at all, since he forgot them on the mountain, and ultimately, it's his fault for not being able to protect Chiron. All this while the witch approached and asked him if he really liked Chiron that much, which slightly alarmed Ayun, who, upon seeing the state of the girl, wondered why that woman was in such a condition, considering it was just a small push. But, standing in front of King Ron, he says that it doesn't matter, as he will protect his beloved. And with that, he asks the witch what he wants, to which the girl retorts with a question. How dare he hit her because of her, which leaves the two lovebirds utterly confused. The witch, noticing Ui's confusion, asks him if he truly doesn't recognize her, even mentioning her name, but he, faced with this, simply replies, "What a strange name," which irritates the girl, who then asks him if he has forgotten all those days when they lived, leaves him. The guy reveals that he was faking and is glad that the system is finally gone. He tells us that after days, too close to Ayun, and also claims that she isn't worthy of being the master's maid. He says all of this because, from the perspective of together in the mountains, but, still unable to remember, he wonders to himself how they could have lived together, since he recalls nothing. Having lived with such beauty, but assuming it's a case of mistaken identity, he plans to use this to his advantage. And therefore, pretending they know each other, he tells her it's been so long that he almost didn't recognize her, all while he thought that remaining steadfast was the most important thing. This pleases the witch, as Ayun finally remembers her, which makes her very happy and excited. She wonders to herself that if he remembers her, then he must have remembered the promise to marry her. However, the girl ends up disappointed when Ayun introduces her as just another The witch, her spirits at rock bottom, wonders why Ayun still wants to choose that woman over her. She asks Ayun where exactly she is inferior, carefully taking his arm. She asks Ayun to look at her closely, showing us both from the same perspective, and asks where she falls short. All the while, one of them thinks that she is clearly better. Faced with this, Maid Ayun looks like a ruthless monster, possessing an aura that could crush a person's very spirit. Admits that there is really no area where she is inferior, but the difference is that he and Chiron share a pure and true love. This was the last straw for the witch, who, with tears welling up in her eyes, accuses him of being a liar, trash, and a bad man. Really upset by this, she tells him that she never wants to see him again. Ayun doesn't say anything, but in his thoughts, he notes that her eyes seem very familiar. When he sees that she's trying to leave, he attempts to stop her, but he's unsuccessful because, as she walks away, the girl hurls a barrage of insults at him. However, even as she leaves, Ayun is still racking his brain, wondering where he could have possibly seen her before, which makes his fiancée. He approaches her and asks if he really knows her, which Ayun denies, claiming he was just lying, but he mentions that this woman is very strange and believes that she is very likely the master of the divine sect, and therefore, he wants to ask Sony about it, but since he doesn't see her, he asks where she is. However, Luyu, who was watching from far away, is surprised and wonders what he just saw, since even the witch is his mare, and upon seeing this, he says he has evil, and just a glance could steal your soul. Seeing herself as so terrifying, the maid wonders what she should do, because nothing to do there, so he will leave. However, just as he was planning to sneak away, someone ends up stopping him, telling him to stop, however, and regretting what happened. That's how we'll be ending this video, but if you enjoyed it, leave a like if you want a continuation. Leave a like, and without anything further to add, bye, bro. Even cultivators in the Golden Core realm don't dare to approach her at all. However, while all this was happening, Ayun's fiancée was reprimanding her maid for being so careless, saying that as his wife, she will not allow Ayun to become involved in the mundane affairs of the cultivation world again, because if a peerless individual like Ayun doesn't, he's weary of this mediocre world. How else can one explain his choice to live in seclusion? Furthermore, in his eyes, the teacher of the sect is no different from the female immortals he's used to seeing, since she's only a commoner, and therefore, according to her, the only way to return to the basics is to be an ordinary wife, without status or position, in order to love him with all her heart, thus imagining himself feeding Ayun and asking if it's delicious. But that system gave him tasks to the point of death, perhaps allowing him to look down on the rest of the world and become ruining the moment. The maid answers as if she were Ayun, telling him not to do it next time, since it's really unpleasant, causing the girl to once again scold her maid for interrupting and tell her that it doesn't matter anyway. The character he has worked so hard to create will be ruined, so he will break up with her, and as he leaves, he only tells her that she needs to make the list change that she requested, since he doesn't want his immortals to disturb his constant happiness, which is something her maid ends up understanding. However, sighing, she wonders if things can really go smoothly, since, even though those immortal cultivators are not as capable as the master, they are not pushovers either, and she fears that in the future, the moment they heard the wedding news, they've been searching for them, high and low. Later, on the outskirts of the house, we see people arriving, seemingly falling from the sky, along with their leader. Upon arriving, with tears in his eyes, he expresses his joy at finally finding Chiron, but then, sounding a bit annoyed, he says that, after a decade of childhood friendship, he has pursued her so diligently, only for her to end up in this backwater. Becoming a top immortal cultivator might be every traveler's dream, but not for him, as this boy's dreams are. Only to marry a man, something he doesn't intend to forgive. And with that said, he and the others, he heads to the entrance, but as he tries to enter, he notices a sound and a very strange aura. It's so powerful that it forces him to retreat. Because of this, he wonders what it is and if it could be a barrier, but dismissing that idea, he says the barrier doesn't have a murderous intent. So terrified, and looking at this terrifying scene, he says that this is something only the most powerful people possess, an external manifestation of immense spiritual power, which makes him wonder if something so incredible truly exists. That break through the gate is like the earth-shattering roar of hell itself, and any higher god standing before it, it would be so insignificant and powerless. And gazing at Ayun's residence, he wonders why Ayun would show up at King Ron's house. Observing a grand image radiating Psalm's aura, He wonders what kind of monster it provoked. However, when they did not, they were not expecting it, but the gate bursts open and Ayun emerges, enveloped in a monstrous aura, and he is different from the others. And approaching this beautiful lady in a red dress, he tells us that his only dream is to marry. He finds it somewhat bothersome because he feels awkward being with other people when his wife isn't there to accompany him, so it is better to go out for some fresh air. But upon noticing the people outside his house, he curses under his breath. Since he hasn't seen much of the world, he assumes these people are beggars and wonders why there are so many. Seeing Ayun emerge in a cold sweat, the group leader declares that he is the source of that destructive aura, and faced with such a monster, he can't even move, and prostrating himself, says how awful this is. Because if he had known King Ron was marrying such a monster, he wouldn't have dared to come and steal her away. However, the one who doesn't realize this tremendous Ayun has power, but he thinks of himself as a weakling, even while believing that the people in front of him are doctors, and considers giving them some money. However, he's surprised to find he has none, resulting in this expression that, from Ayun's perspective, looks like this. Seeing it, Ayun thinks Ayun is angry and starts cursing, because in his mind, Ayun is preparing a spell to end his life for provoking him. Stuck in the doorway, and with no other option, a big and beautiful woman like his wife, and while flirting with her, he tells us that this is his fiancée, Chiron, and he takes out a sword, saying that to survive, he has to do everything he can. Therefore, with the sword in his hand, because they didn't want to offend him, and if by any chance he doesn't believe it, he can do whatever he wants with his sword. All of this. It leaves Ayun confused, since he doesn't understand anything that's happening. According to him, those people came to beg for food, and therefore he wonders why he's giving them anything. Besides, the moment he looks at the sword carefully, he realized that the sword belongs to an immortal, and since he doesn't want that most unfortunate system to return, he tells the boy that he can't use that sword. However, the moment Ayun touched the sword, an aura emerges, taking the form of a woman who is the sword's ancestor. And while the aura in the form of, when the woman touched Ayun, he was simply confused because he didn't understand what was happening. But the boy with the sword knows what's going on. Surprised, he says that man merely touched the sword and awakened the ancestor who had been sleeping within it for thousands of years. The ancestor, now in the form